Hello, welcome to Legalese. I'm attorney Christopher Lilly. I'm your host. It's been a while since we've met, but today, well, let me tell you the date today anyway. It's July 31st, 2020. We are about 4.5 months into the COVID crisis. Today we're going to be talking about the COVID crisis and how it has affected the court system, specifically at the Air District Court. And today we are fortunate to be joined by Judge Margaret Guzman, who is the presiding judge of the Air District Court, has been since 2017, about 3 years before the court closures took place. Welcome, Judge. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And I will take off my mask. We're properly socially distanced. And thank you so much, Attorney Lilly. It is my pleasure to be back here.
Well, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure to have you, and really, this is a topic that I think is of interest probably to everybody who is sitting at home, still trying to work their way through the quarantining process and trying to get back to some semblance of normal. Now, as the COVID crisis has affected the court system, I want to say that things truly began to transpire about mid-March. Is that correct?
It is. We had some sense in that the second week to the 13th that there would be some interruption and that there would be some unusual time delays. We weren't quite sure where it was going. It was fairly clear by the trial court administration that there was an escalation. I think it really came to a head when New York shut down New Rochelle. And it really brought everyone's attention where it ought to be to the potential for the spread. So we really started to hear the rumblings at the end of that second week. And then the court administration made all of the district courts and the other individual courts aware over that weekend.
And that began a series of orders from the Supreme Judicial Court, from the trial court, that successively extended the time in which things were to be closed. So I want to say initially we received an order, though it had followed after 2 days of the courts being actually closed.
Yes.
Where on the 17th there was an order saying that the courts would be closed until, I think it was April 5th.
Yes, that was the first. That was the initial.
That was the optimistic.
Well, I'm not sure it was about optimism.
Okay.
I think it was about trying to give as much advance without going out too far.
Okay.
And trying the trial court administration. And I give many, many kudos to the civil administrator, John Williams, and most especially Chief Paula Carey, who is the chief of the trial court, along with Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Ralph Gantz, working with the different heads of each one of the trial court departments. They were dealing with a behemoth. They were literally stopping a locomotive train, which was going at 100 miles an hour. And they were doing it in a matter of days, in some cases a matter of hours.
Not having the foresight of what could happen or what's going to happen.
Right. Although it was pretty clear to anybody that was paying attention that there was going to be a disruption of some sort. We could have anticipated, if everything went wrong, that it would be a prolonged period of time. But at the very least, the trial court needed jurors not to come to courts, lawyers to stay where they are, emergency services for legal emergencies. They had to put procedures in place. And so I think they acted really quite decisively with enough warning. And during that period of time, it gave them some ability to really marshal information and resources to try and plan for the long term.
And I recall prior to the closures, we were looking at when we could schedule trials and when that might make sense. Unfortunately, we've had to reschedule some of those. But okay, so we had the date of the 5th of April. That became the 4th of May. That became
the beginning of June.
The beginning of June.
No June date got marked in infamy, but it was fairly clear that they were trying to give room for occurrences outside of their control to happen so that they could inform the court going forward.
And what were you doing or able to do as a judge, as the court system, to continue with the business of the court during that time?
Well, I was there every day. I went into court. We had the heads of departments at the court, and we had a couple of key administrative staff with us. The first thing that we had to do was maintain a presence in the court, because even if you can't have a jury trial, even if you can't have a motion, even if people can't come and get a hearing on an eviction or a small claim, financial debt, there are restraining orders, there are emergency commitments, there are arrests, and there is a need for the court to be available. But in that first week, really what needed to happen is we needed to establish some way for the public to contact us, for the lawyers to get some information from us. Things, we were an information provider, all hands were on deck. Everybody working there, including myself, was answering the phone, pouring coffee, trying to, make stacks of files. Those first couple of weeks were very, really affirming to me about the commitment of the court staff, how willing they were to come in. And I think it was funny, now I look back on it, it was months ago, but on that first day, we all came in court clothes, suits, all of our regular clothing. What we didn't have were masks. Oh. I think about that now. But then it really hadn't spread in the way that it has. And just as an aside, and I don't mean to jinx our court, but we had no employees that had demonstrated any symptoms that tested positive. We had some 3-4 layers out, degrees of separation of people who might have had someone in their family or some in their community, but we did not. We were lucky. There was a lot of thoughtfulness that went into the people that were coming into the building. We were very, very cautious about who came into the building. What was the plan if somebody had somebody close to them that may have come down with something? Well, was there anything in place that would say, well, you've got to stay home for a certain amount of time? No, there was nothing in place. What happened was within that first week, the first or the second week, I can't, it seems so long ago now, but my mind is still in March. I know. Well, before the end of March, fairly soon, one of the courts had a person test, and I think that was Lawrence. Okay. And what happened, the protocol really developed from that. They shut the court down. Right. They brought cleaners in. The person who was infected, who went for treatment, was quarantined. Anybody that they had, so they had already started that protocol of if you were working with that person, you also went home to quarantine. They really tried to, because it doesn't always cross departments. Probation may not come into the clerk's office. The judge may not go into the clerk's office themselves, or may not see the security. So it really depended on people to self-report who they were in contact with. It started to spread sporadically. Different courts had experiences with it. How long would they end up shutting down? 3 days. So the 3-day shutdown was for the purpose of deep cleaning all surfaces and to giving people an opportunity to go away, consider whether or not they'd had any contact with that individual. We had 2 actual occurrences in courts in Massachusetts that got shut down when the college kids came home from Europe. Oh. And that was really, what we realize now is that the spread was not really necessarily from Asia. It was from Europe.
Okay.
And where there are so many college exchange students and high school students who go to Europe on school trips, and when they were coming home, they were forced to come home before the shutdown. That one of them the daughter was ill, the father got it, he was a judge, and he was a traveling judge, so he sat in 3 different courts.
Oh, good Lord.
So all 3 courts had to be shut down. But that became, so as those experiences happened, they developed a protocol. The court did.
Good.
It was smart. It was thoughtful. Even if the court couldn't be open, there were other courts that were open that could do the business.
So if one court closed for 3 days and
Some other
business
courts-
had to occur for that court,
Well,
another court would step up.
Or the judges and probation were able to work remotely. We almost immediately started using Zoom and WebEx. I think it's called Google Chat, or so there are a number of platforms. For dinosaurs like myself, it has been the learning curve was very steep, but it was a necessity. You just did it. In fact, within that first week, I had a very serious and very long, at least 4 hours emergency mental health commitment hearing on Zoom. It was insane trying to figure out how to do it because, yeah, there was no one in the building that was under 50. So we were so we were contacting the IT department, someone called their teenage son. We got through it, as we did just about everything. We got through it.
So now how did a hearing like that occur over Zoom? Who was present? How would they be transmitted into the court or receive transmissions from the court?
So the attorneys were calling from their homes. The invitation came out from the court. The court invited them. So we determined, because it was a hearing in which they were profoundly mentally ill, but they insisted on being present for the hearing.
Okay.
So the hospital that they were in had them in a conference room, and the medical staff was there with them.
Okay.
The lawyer was at their home, the defense lawyer was at their home, and I was sitting actually in the clerk's office because we had to find a computer that could do it.
Sure.
And we also had to use a telephone line because we didn't realize that Zoom doesn't run forever. So if you only have a certain license, it only goes for like 45 minutes. So it was a 4-hour hearing. So we had to send out 2 invitations, and then the final third of the hearing, we did it over the telephone.
Over the telephone.
It was when I think about doing that, I think that's what we're prepared for, is to just do it. We don't always have optimal conditions.
I'm sorry.
No, but that circumstance required it.
A lot of hearings were also being held just by audio.
Just by audio. In fact, most of our work is done by audio. The audio is right into the courtroom. It can go on the record. The other thing is a record, because even these proceedings are involving people's liberty and their privacy interests, and they have all their rights are maintained. So we have to be sure that what we were doing is preserving the record and preserving their rights to the best that we could do it.
You had to come up with some colloquies on the fly as far as dealing with such things as you had some pleas.
Yes. So we had people who had circumstances. They had to close their cases. Not everybody can just take 4 months off. Many of these cases already had been in the system for a number of months, in some cases years, depending on delays that were not related to anything other than the just gathering of evidence. And people's lives go on. And so we had to, we had a great administrative staff in Boston available to us, providing us with information. There is an incredible group of judges who I was able to reach out to, judges who were working remotely and weren't actually presiding in courts, but were absolutely available to me when I had to, how do I be sure that I do it right, I preserve their rights, and they were very helpful. It was a lot of camaraderie. It really drew out the very best of our training.
So now, the nature of cases that were actually coming before the court. A lot of cases were being put over. We still aren't at a stage
Right.
where we can have jury trials. But back then, things were even more limited. We were dealing with quite a bit, I think, as far as arrests, custodies, coming in, emergency situations.
Well, you know, it was an interesting occurrence. Now that I've sat in air for more than 3 years, the court, with its 10 communities and 14 different law enforcement agencies, has a very wide geographical coverage area, including many, many highways. Motor vehicle stops, either resulting in motor vehicle infractions or arrests of other types, they have a significant impact on our court. It stopped. Just stopped.
Not the stops. The stops didn't stop, but
yes, they did.
They did?
They stopped. The police stopped pulling people over. Imagine you're a police officer in a town and you see someone, you know, speeding, fewer people on the road, but you see someone speeding, you go over. You have no idea. They don't know. They don't. That person's not wearing a mask. You don't know where they're from. There was a very significant impact on the interplay between law enforcement and citizens. You know, police officers, they were frontline workers, just like nurses, just like, you know, firefighters or EMTs. They couldn't make a decision about doing it or not doing it. If they were called to duty, they had to do the duty. And at the beginning, there were not all the, we weren't cognizant of all of the protective equipment that we would need in order to keep everyone safe. So that was a grave concern. Police officers, and it was really department heads who made the decision. There were fewer people on the road, and it really just was, in the abundance of caution, don't, unless there is a real reason, a real public safety reason to engage with a driver, don't. And
did that directive come from on high, or
it was
is that
very
just
organic? Very organic.
Kind of the way it was understood. People were exercising discretion.
Right. If you have 2 full-time police officers and one of them stops someone and they pick up the virus and they go back to the department, you could shut your entire department down. So, and in the end, it really, I thought it was a very good decision. It allowed them to focus on emergencies. Their work became much more emergencies. What we started to see, even though we've always had a number of domestic, discord amongst family is a large part of what the court does. It does a lot of that. That rose, because now what you've done is you've taken families that have fissures and you've forced them to stay together.
Right.
Add on to that the isolation and the increased use of alcohol and other substances. So we had, most of our work was related to those kind of issues.
Allegations of domestic violence.
Yeah, domestic violence and the other stuff that kind of happens when there is a dysfunction in the family and there's nowhere to go, nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
So, I mean, imagine, you know, if someone, you know, would go down to the local McDonald's and get a coffee and sit and read the newspaper just to kind of blow off steam. Well, there was nothing open. And that really led to the greatest amount of our work.
How would that manifest itself in terms of what you were receiving in the court? Were people coming in after being released from custody? Were people coming in custody?
We had only a couple people come in custody. We were doing a lot of work, so maintaining the defendants normally are brought to the courthouse. We did it through, the police would call us. We had set up a system that the defendant could have contact with an attorney, and the attorney was generally on the phone.
Right.
And everything was pretty remote. So there were, we made sure that all of the most important things, access to an attorney with a private conversation, a real argument about whether or not they should be held. And there was a very, very serious commitment on the part of the trial court that we should not be holding people in custody on bails except in the most significant circumstances, because to hold them on a bail they can't post means they're going to a jail, and we do know that the facilities that are closed,
there was
nursing
some
homes,
issues there.
if there's a disease, it's going to spread.
In fact, that went up very quickly to the Supreme Judicial Court.
It did, for good reason, because they're in a confined environment. They can't leave, and places like that, you cannot completely protect everybody. It is a communal, it's by its very nature, communal eating facilities, communal bedrooms, communal rec rooms. I mean, it's just, and we're talking about a physically challenged population. So the court really took that into account. The SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, was very cognizant of that. People who could get out because they were really vulnerable and they weren't really a danger to society, they had to be released.
Right.
So I think the court over its series of, and you did already mention this, and you kind of telegraphing it, there just was a series of orders going forward, adapting to the changing circumstances. We are now open, and in a limited fashion.
As of July
13th. And it's been, gosh, for me, it has been a relief. There's a sense of what the court looks like. People are there. Now, we spent
People are legitimately happy to see each other.
Literally, yeah, I know. Defendants and witnesses.
Yeah.
We spent the most of the time as a court working with staff, including our maintenance staff, security, the clerk's office, probation, the trial court, the judiciary, and the attorneys, both district attorneys and private attorneys, and the court-appointed bar, to create a system in our court which puts people at secure places. We have the appropriate social distancing. We have, I think we have an incredibly effective workplace where people can come in as witnesses, as litigants, as lawyers, and feel safe in our building.
So today, how is that? How is the COVID crisis being dealt with for people trying to come into the court? They're allowed into the court.
They're allowed into the court. We are still not. Anything that can be done by agreement remotely, meaning over the telephone, over Zoom, or some other form of technological participation, we're doing. So that we're minimizing the amount of people that are in. We're delaying arraignments for minor motor vehicle offenses. We're doing...
There's got to be a stockpile of those.
Yeah, there is, but we have been clearing that out. We have been doing, we do them, a lot of them telephonically. Good. But we're still trying to keep our numbers of people down. We don't want to jeopardize the amount of work that we did to put the court in a very good position, which we did. And it was a joint effort of all parties. And I feel very confident that we're starting to increase the amount of work we're doing, and we're starting to really address some of the backlog. So
I've noticed certainly some changes in coming into court where Plexiglass is introduced in quite a few areas. People that may be either surrounded by it or have at least a shield in front of them that's designed to protect if there's any, I guess, kind of
so wherever there is a place where there's going to be interaction with the public. So the court staff, they have to interact with the public at the counter. The probation staff, they have to interact with their population at the counter. We're creating the plexiglass just allows you to have the interaction with an added layer of protection. Because of the nature, I'm up on the bench, and the bench is a distance, probably 30 feet from where the people are, but I wear a mask, as does everybody, whenever I'm in the courthouse, in the court halls, and when I go out on the bench. But while I'm on the bench, it's very difficult for me to communicate, and most of my work is done verbally. I'm speaking to litigants, speaking to lawyers, And so I announced that I'm taking my mask off. There's one plexiglass in front of me.
Yeah.
And then there's another one in front of the clerk, which is about 6 feet from me.
Right.
And then there is a plexiglass in front of the podium where the defendants or any witness will stand. There's plenty of room so that I am still able to do my job effectively. They are able to be in court and be heard. So, and we have the distancing. And our court officers are very, very diligent. We make sure that people who come in together are able to sit together, but we keep people apart completely in the courthouse.
So there are signs throughout the benches keeping people separated by
There's
6
also a
feet at
number.
least.
There's a maximum number of people who are allowed in. That was done by as a survey of what we had as far as a footprint to keep people safe.
And the biggest change I noticed is the taking of temperature.
I have my temperature checked every day. Every court staff comes in, and the court officers are required to take the temperature of themselves and of staff, and then every person that comes in. There's a series of questions, and those questions are required, and then there is the temperature check. So it is the first time it's done, the first time you have to submit to that, it's odd. Now it's routine. First thing I do when I come in is go up to the court officer desk, and in the public sphere, they see if I have a temperature, everyone's going to know it. So,
would you care to hazard a guess as to when we're going to return to the old normal?
We're never going to return to the old normal.
Okay.
So my guess is, and my hope is, that we never return. Sometimes you just do things always the same way. What do you see the new normal is looking like? So the new normal is a more streamlined approach to court. It makes sense. People don't have to drive in. Let's say they get a ticket and they want to fight it, but they were coming up from Bridgewater on their way to a business luncheon or something. Then they have to come all the way up. And we're telling people, no, you don't. I mean, you certainly can. And courts are open to anybody. But the new normal is being conscious of being in a space. And I don't mean just in court, I mean in our life. We don't think about the space that we occupy and what we bring to that space, and our responsibility not just to ourselves but to other people in that space. This has caused us to really think about what it is to be a society, and do we owe a duty to each other to make it as safe a place as it can be? And I think we do. And I'm not, I am very desperately sad that was there a possibility that fewer people could have died had different decisions been made?
Right.
That's beyond my decision making, or even I don't even want to opine on it.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that decisions that we make have consequences.
Sure.
And the only thing I can say is the decisions that we've made at the Air District Court, I hope, will put the community that we serve at ease, that if they have to come to court and they have a legal issue, they will be heard and they will be safe.
Judge Guzman, thank you very much for appearing here. This has been our first legalese in many, many months. And
well, it's good to be back in the fray.
It's good to see you, and it's good to have you here. I want to thank you all for your attention, and I'll caution you all to stay safe and abide by those guidelines. Thank you.